Hey everybody, Josh Searts in a World Alternative Media here, and of course we're joined by author and economic analyst here at WAM, John Sneisen. And Sweden is making another massive mistake as SJ, I'm not going to pronounce the name, you can do it.
Svenska Järnbanen, which
Yeah.
is the Swedish railroad.
It's a Swedish railroad company, and they are now RFIDing customers. It's voluntary, but they're RFIDing customers so you could scan your hand for your ticket instead of carrying those damn tickets around because, oh, that's so terrible. As they say, it's for convenience. It's because, why not just get a chip if you're already being tracked on your phone and with your Visa card, etc., etc.? No, this isn't the point. Convenience is always the guise of real totalitarian designs, real nefarious technocratic ideas. And this has been happening on a far greater scale lately. We've seen that with a cashless society, something that Sweden has been looking at for quite some time, alongside places like India and China and Australia.
The biometric systems in India with your fingerprint and your retina scanning.
Yeah, and this has been happening for a while because even in the United States, several years ago, there was voluntary RFIDing, people going, yay, I got an RFID chip so I can be tracked everywhere, and people are getting it for their Bitcoin wallets, etc. And this is just one of the things that people like about Bitcoin is that, you aren't as likely to be tracked, and then, well, let's put an RFID chip in my hand. This is getting crazy, folks, and people have been talking about this for a long time, yet everyone just thought we were completely insane at the time, and it's just elapsing in front of us, and no one's doing anything because for the sake of convenience they put the chains on their feet. It's hard to free fools from the chains they revere, as has been said by people of great wisdom so many times in the past.
Well, what's interesting today is you got RFID chips everywhere now. You got them in your credit cards and debit cards. You got them in your passport. There's RFIDs in there. There's of course RFIDs in all the different phones that we have. So there's a lot of tracking going on that we are not knowledgeable about, and people got to understand this. Like, I work with access control systems, and I understand how these RFID chips works. Well, the problem is somebody could just hack and steal your data, because as soon as you scan, that's when you could put a device on there and steal all that information. So now you can have another person suddenly like putting in their own RFID, and then they could go around and be you.
Yeah.
So it's highly dangerous, and of course the control grid that you create with these RFID chipping is insane. You would be crazy and insane, and I would die. I would never, ever, ever in my whole lifetime, even though how technological we become, implement an RFID tracking chip in my arm.
Well, that's the thing, John, because you might not have a choice someday, and this is what I wanted to get down to, is the fact that, well, talk about Orwellian. This is a much greater control complex than people realize, and if you think that this isn't an example of an Orwellian totalitarian tyrannical future, then you're wrong. You're just wrong, because if you put together every bit of the puzzle from all across the board, it's incremental move towards technocracy and complete collective control, and I'll give you a few examples. So just an RFID chip in your hand to get on a train doesn't seem so bad to some people. Well, let's put it together with the debt enslavement from the monetary system, the market manipulation that pushes people into poverty, and there's a control complex where you're thrown down a bottomless pit of debt, and your only option is to ask for a ladder up from the government and the banking system, which puts you into servitude. Then on top of that, you have these public schools that indoctrinate and imprison the mind within a certain box, a certain line of thinking. Then you have these wars that are going on across the board, where we're thrown into these conflicts where we could be killed, and all for what? Just to be used as pawns to kill off for the king and the queen. Then you have another example. The media brainwashes you to the extent where you're nothing more than just the follow-up from your public school indoctrination camp, where you don't know anything about what's going on. Then you have your defense taken away from you. So they take away the guns. They take away your ability to defend yourself, saying, well, if you like your ability to defend yourself, you hate children, you want kids to die, blah, 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 even though the most violent crime happens in places without guns. But let's just not look at those facts and say that you hate children and want them to die or whatever. So take away the defense, take away your sound money. So they put you in debt, they put you in chains that you revere so much, and then they put in a cashless society, so your money is never yours. It's always the banks, and it's always centrally planned through the banking system, through transactions. Every transaction is tracked, and you have an RFID chip in your hand, and you're unhealthy because of the food system that's been monopolized by the government. This is what we're talking about. You put all these puzzle pieces together, and there are more than that, and you end up in perfect servitude. You become a slave, and look at the future and just picture a boot stomping on a human face forever, as George Orwell so aptly put. The fact of the matter is we are marching in with great smiles on our face.
Back to 1984.
Back to 1984, and we are just loving the grass in the field, in the enclosure, as we're, able to say, well, we got this grass, we're able to eat the grass like a good cow, right before being marched off to the slaughter. And that's what's happening, folks, and this is why we need to start paying attention and be a bit louder, because this seems like nothing, but if you think this is not, these tests for RFIDs aren't being used as a way to be used later on by the government, you're wrong, because we've seen that with retina scans, we've seen that with fingerprinting, and it's all come to fruition, and we were crazy until we weren't, and all the most, correct people historically have unfortunately been seen as crazy before it comes together.
Think about the conditioning, guys. When you go and buy with a credit card today, a lot of times you have the tap function, and even with your phone, you present your hand. So think about that. The next scale is, conditioning you to, just presenting your hand every time you do something. And who knows? Well, I think it's conditioning more than anything. Is getting you to get ready to implant yourself. And they talked about, I believe, where was it now? I think it was Australia or somewhere else. But they were talking about actually RFID chipping their kids and their seniors. So think about where we're going with this, guys, before you start to want to implement this. Think about where and the control grid that you're putting into place for somebody that could get into power and then just completely eliminate the people that it doesn't like, just like Hitler did, but with a massive technocratic grid on proportion. So what Stasi ever could have done.
It's far more easier to control the populace. So you could do that, or you could just continue drinking the fluoride in your water, the hydrofluorosilicic acid, which destroys your mind and kills your bones. You could keep doing that. Give yourself Alzheimer's, lots of aluminum. Go to war, not think about your children's future, potentially going to war, being drafted, killed for as a sacrifice to the king and the queen. Not think about the fact that they'll be tracked everywhere, that they'll be used as a pawn.
An ATM.
Yeah, exactly. Just destroy the markets with vast manipulation, destroy the monetary system with vast manipulation, put everyone into poverty, put everyone into this box, and then kill them. I mean, this is insane. And if we don't start paying a bit more attention and not be afraid to go into this conspiratorial realm, which is just facts, we are going to end up in a very ugly future. And you don't have to care about yourself. Just care about your children, care about your family, care about your friends, care about the future generations of your friends, children, etc., etc. We have to start being louder about this, because we are walking down a very steep cliff, and eventually it recedes further and the incline becomes greater, and we will end up falling, and it's to our own demise. So think about this, folks. Be more vigilant and start speaking a bit more loudly, because don't worry about being seen as crazy, because you will be vindicated, unfortunately. But let's not get too much vindication here. Let's end this before it comes to its ultimate conclusion, its end game.
Well, yeah, and think about this. In that type of RFID scenario, you could just present your hand and then somebody scans you, because that's what you have. You call skimmers, which actually, as it transmits, you could just steal that information from that person, and then somebody else could be you. So think about the dangers of what you're getting yourself into here, because it's a very, very slippery slope, and we got to stop this.
Imagine fighting against a tyrannical government, but you're all tracked, so all they have to do is go boop, 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 on a map where you're seen running away. It's just insane.
Yeah, well, how about this? For example, you have your RFID chip. They could just place some cyanide or some kind of terrible toxic thing in there, and then you could just have it crush in there, and then just go into the bloodstream and kill that person if you wanted to eliminate them. By radio, of course, you could just send a signal to that device and then self-destruct.
Yeah, and you're done. There's all these theories, and I mean, like, the fact is, it just makes us incredibly vulnerable at the very least. And I think people have to take note of this and speak out louder. That's all I'm gonna say about this.
Just stop calling them like crazy conspiracy theories and actually care a little bit about it, because they are implementing this. It's right here in front of us.
And the government does not have our best intentions in mind.
No.
Yeah.
It never has throughout history. So like, it's time for everybody to stand up and expose this for what it is, and not letting themselves get led down this road to totalitarian technocracy, guys.
Absolutely. So thanks for watching.